Alrighty guys, this is snugsonblitz and I'm back with another video for you today. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about tanks that I consider must-have tanks in tiers 5 through 10. Why no tiers 2, 3, 4? Because they're pretty much insignificant these days. Very dull gameplay, no real standouts, nothing really fun about those tiers, if you ask me. Most people will agree with me. But from tier 5, it starts getting interesting. So I'm just going to focus on those tiers. It's a shame because, to be honest, a long time ago, tiers 2 through 4 were very entertaining as well. But alas, those days have come and gone. So we are in 2024. It's just turned August. Hopefully I'll be getting my special anniversary present soon, just like you. Looking forward to that. But in the meantime, you're probably going to be asking yourself, well, what tanks does Snug recommend? You say, well, Snugs, you gave us a tier list just a while back. Aren't those the tanks you recommend? Well, yes and no. I created that list, or those lists, I should say, to help you decide which tanks are strong for the average player. If you're a pro, you can make your own decisions. If you're a fool, well, it probably won't help you. But if you're an average player, you can kind of understand how easy those tanks are to play. The higher up on the list, the easier it will be for you to be able to influence the battle. I'm not saying win, but help your team perform. The lower on the tier list, the more you will struggle to help your team. You need to know more things on the map, or how to use your tanks, or the elevation, gun depression, all those sort of things. But today, because of one of the comments I got from my tier list, I thought it's worth sharing with you what tanks I consider must-haves. Now that means you might not agree with me. In fact, nobody agreed with my tier list either. That's okay. But must-have tanks are the tanks that I enjoy, that I think are worthy of a space in your garage, that are worthy of spending your hard ground cash in a game, or gold, or even just, the good old dollars you've saved up from working your 9-to-5 job. There's a lot of tanks in Blitz, so you don't, unless you played it as many games as I have, you really want to pick up the best tanks first, probably, or at least the most enjoyable, unique, interesting tanks. So I'm going to share with you my thoughts. Now, that's my cat, so if you can hear a bell in the background, I'm sorry about that. But hopefully she won't interrupt our little video here. So remember, I'm just going to share with you the tanks I like and why I like them. If you don't, that's cool. But if you're curious what tanks I recommend, then I will give you my thoughts today. Tomorrow, you might have guessed, I will be dropping the mediums, or tank destroyers, or heavy tanks. I haven't decided which order I'm going to release them, but I promise I will get to each type of tank. I wasn't sure if I should do it by tiers or types of tanks, but I think types of tanks are easier for people to understand, because some people have a tendency to be good at heavies or medium tanks or tank destroyers. And so it's not about the tiers, but it's about the types of tanks that they like, that they play well with. I've played a crap ton of games. Every time I've got some free time, I'm just playing a few games here and there. It all has added up to a lot of games. So I've played every tech tree tank. I've got every tech tree tank. I had them. I sold a few. I've got most premium tanks. Some of the new ones I haven't picked up. Some of the tanks that I just didn't think were interesting or fake, like the 047, the Nameless, the Valkyrie, the Lupus, those type of tanks. I just said no thank you. I wasn't interested in them. But I've got most tanks. I don't know the grand total right now off the top of my head. I could take a look, but I'm too lazy to do so. But trust me when I say I've got pretty much every tank that you could really want, except maybe those few super new tanks, such as the Senlac, Object 590, the new 114, the BZ Tier 9 tank. I don't know, a few a handful of tanks. I would say about 10 to 15 tanks that I don't have from the premium line. Well, if you exclude the Valkyrie, 20 tanks maybe I don't have, I guess. Something like that. But trust me, I know these tanks, I know this game. I think I can give you some solid advice. So let's just get to it, shall we? Let's not waste any more time. Starting off in Tier 5, we have the Titan Mark 1. Now, this is pretty much a copy-paste of the Crusader. Fun note here, at one point, my buddy and I, we were both in the top 10 performers in Asia in this tank. Most people couldn't perform well in this tank at all, and my buddy and I both made top 10. Can you believe that? That was crazy. It was a tough tank to play, but it was the highest tier light tank we had at the time, if you can believe that. This is it, Tier 5. No other higher tier light tank in the game. How times have changed. Do I recommend it? No, not really. I mean, it's okay, but yeah, if you really want to pick up a light tank in Tier 5, I think it's got to be this tank, the Leopard. Unfortunately, does it get my seal of approval? It doesn't. Why is that? Well, this used to be crazy good when this was first implemented in the game. This and the tier before it, the Lush, I think it's pronounced. Absolutely awesome tanks. Absolutely awesome. And they made me really enjoy Blitz. Like, for the first time in the game, I was like, oh my gosh, these are fun tanks. Oh my gosh, I can play them. Oh my gosh, I can dominate games. It was crazy fun. But, unfortunately, they nerfed it a little bit. I think it's lost one shell, if I'm not mistaken. So, it's the better of the two in Tier 5 or 3, I guess, light tanks you can choose from. But it doesn't get my seal of approval. Oh well. Better luck next year, maybe. Let's move on to Tier 6. We have the AMX 12-ton. I really like this tank. I really like it. I think it's underrated. The gun actually works. It's got great camo values. And if you snipe in this tank in the beginning, you'll do just fine. Does it get my seal of approval? I want to say yes. But I think for most players, I'm going to say I don't think so. I don't think it's that enjoyable for most players. So I can't give it my seal of approval, unfortunately. Just because I think most people won't really enjoy playing this tank. But do I like it? Yes, very much so. The 5916 Chinese light tank. It's fast. It's not got the best gun depression. It's a little bit tough to manufacture shots. Is it fun? Sort of. But that's all I can really say about it. I would give this tank a pass. What about the MT25? And now we're talking something interesting here. 4 shells. Okay, that's got my attention. It's the only Tier 6 tank with 4 shells. You can have some crazy games. If 2 of you are running around in a platoon, that's 8 shells to decimate your enemies. That can be very fun. Does this get my seal of approval? I don't think it does. The pen is not the best. So I like this tank. I just need something more, a little bit more. And I'm using calibrated, so yeah. Sad to say, it doesn't get my seal of approval. So far we've got no tanks. Will we have any Tier 6 tanks that make my list? How about the Agent, which is pretty much a 2801? Well, at one point, this was the creme de la creme, probably the best tank in Blitz. Tier for tier, there was no tank like it. It was absolutely awesome. The mobility, the gun, the pramo, oh my gosh, what an amazing tank. In fact, it was so good, I stopped playing it because I thought it's so unfair. It's just not fun. The enemy team would just get wrecked. I could take out every medium tank without any trouble with this tank. And this is a light tank. I could zoom around them, I'd bounce shells, the armor worked. What an amazing tank. How about today? Well, sad to say, the Agent is slightly better than the VK281. This has been nerfed. Do they get my seal of approval? That's the question, though. And my answer is yes, it definitely does. It is still a very fun tank. Not super OP anymore, unfortunately, but it's still a very solid tank. And for that, I'm going to say it's a must-have tank. What about the American Lights, the T-37, or the Chaffee? Well, let's start with the T-37. No. Short and sweet. It's okay. Again, it's fast. The gun is okay, but it's gotten nothing that really excites me about it. That's the problem. The Chaffee is the faster of the two, with probably the worst gun, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, neither of them excite me. They're just okay tanks. If you like speed, I guess go for the Chaffee, but I would say neither of these tanks make my cut. What about tier 7 tanks? And granted, some of the tanks will be at the end because I pinned them. I'm too lazy to unpin them, so just deal with that. What about tier 7? By the way, I hope you guys have got a pen and piece of paper nearby, just jotting these things down so you can remember which tanks to pick up, or what I suggest you pick up. The AMX 75. This is a pretty good tank. 3 shells. The pen does work on this tank. It can be a real pest. Again, if you double these up, quite a deadly force, to be honest, on the battlefield. Does it get my seal of approval? It's on the edge here. When I first made this video, and I've made this video twice, because the first time I got a copyright issue thingamajig, which I don't want to go into it, I said no. How about now that I've had some time to think about it a little bit more? In my opinion, it gets my seal of approval. Yes, I really like this tank. It's close though. You've got great camo. The gun does work, and that's why I'm going to go with this one. But the AMX 1357, which is very similar to the Endurance that just came out a while ago, I cannot give my seal of approval simply because the pen is not good enough. But likewise with the AMX 1375, if you double these up, you can have some crazy fun. Because in this tank, you have 6 shells. If you double that up, that's 12. And you can, if you find a lone wolf just trying to get around, you can absolutely rip them to shreds. Yes, it'll be cut by 1,000. It'll be death by 1,000 cuts, but it is a crazy fun. It's also good for special modes. That's one thing to bear in mind, but it's not my must-have tank, unfortunately. What about the M41 Bulldog, basically, or the American one, which will appear later? I think this gets my seal of approval. Why? The crazy games you can have in this. It's so fast. It's a little bit chaotic, and you have no armor. You're going to get wrecked so many times, but you can have some crazy fun as well. And the guns firing, oh man, you're just going to be shredding tanks. Again, if you double these up, they're so much fun to play in a platoon. So I would say definitely get this in your garage. What about the Type 62? Well, at one point, this was probably one of the best premium tanks you could get, because despite it being tier 7, the prem on this is absolutely fantastic. You'll be able to penetrate most tier 8 tanks nowadays. At one point, pretty much every heavy tank, and you could use it as a sniper, no problem whatsoever. Nowadays, you've got to fiddle with the equipment a little bit, but it is still a fantastic tank, and I think it deserves a place in your garage, which is why it gets my seal of approval. Yeah, it's fast, it's agile, you won't get out of control. You've got great camo. I mean, everything about this tank works. But you've got no armor, so just like every tank on this list pretty much has no armor. You just got to be careful of that. What about the VZ131? Well, it's very much like the tier 6, and therefore it does not make the cuts. Sorry about that. Same problems as the tier 6. I mean, it's zippy, but it's hard to manufacture shots sometimes, especially on hilly terrain. So yeah, give this one a pass in my opinion. The LTTB, when this first came out, this would have definitely made my list. But these days, I mean, the armor is decent for a light tank, I will say. But I don't know, it's just lost a little bit of its edge. So I would say give this one a pass, sad to say. What about the LTG? Now, to be honest, I was surprised to see this on this list. I really thought this was a tank destroyer, because the gun really does work on this, and it is quite fast. I thought it was classed as a tank destroyer. I really did. But lo and behold, it's a light tank. Do I recommend it? No. In fact, I'd forgotten about this tank completely. Just didn't really enjoy it. It is fast. The gun does work, but it's hard to manufacture shots being so low to the ground. However, it really should be used as a tank destroyer in the beginning, in my opinion, because of the great camo values, and the gun does work. So if you play it like that, I think you can have some fun. But don't push in too hard with this tank, in my opinion, to start the game. What about the Kunze Panzer? Well, this is an RU-251 that's more enjoyable and easier to control and do damage, because Yeah, it's not that fast, but it's fast enough. The gun does work. It doesn't have, I think, the great HE that the RU-251 has, or HEP, but it's still an enjoyable tank. I really like this one. I prefer this to the 251, but will this make my cut? Sadly, it does not. But it's a solid tank. There's the Bulldog. Likewise, as I said earlier, I mean, it's a copy-paste of the M41D. Sorry, vice versa. Sorry, the M41D is a copy-paste of this tank. So if I give the M41D a must-have tank, this also gets the must-have award. Yeah. I mean, these are just crazy fun. For a little crazy fun. Don't expect to dominate games until you become a pretty good player. They're tough to play. Moving on to Tier 8, the Swindler. Well, to be fair, it's not fully loaded. I can't really say how well this performs on the battlefield, but I don't really enjoy this tank. The long shell reload if you fire the third one, oh god, that's a pain in the butt. It's just not a very good tank in my opinion. Don't really enjoy it. I do okay in it, but doesn't mean that I would recommend it to anybody. So doesn't make my cut. What about the Chinese Tier 8, the third tech tree tank in the line? No, no, it's got the same problems as the two previous tanks. It's fast, you know, the gun does work, but it's hard to manufacture shots, blah, blah, blah. Same thing. So, yeah, give this one a pass. Now, the LT-432, I think if you like light tanks, I would say, yes, get this. But for me, I can't give it my seal of approval. I just didn't really enjoy this tank that much. Sad to say. It got better when I added Calibrated. It really needed. I couldn't pen a lot of tanks, even focusing on their weak spots. So Calibrated is absolute must if you get this tank. It is fast, and you can have some crazy battles, but I just didn't really enjoy it that much. The T-54 Lightweight. Well, at one point, this was another great tank. When it got implemented in the game, this was better than most mediums again. The armor worked, the gun worked. I was like, why would you drive a medium tank when you have a tank like this? You know, Pershing or Century. No, this was a better tank. But it's just lost a bit of its edge. It's okay. Would I say get it? Is it a must-have tank? Sadly, not anymore. What about the Tier 8 Bulldog? I mean, I've recommended the other two Bulldogs. Why not recommend this one? I think it's a crazy tank, just like the Bulldog, but it has a few things against it. Number one, it's fighting Tier 9 tanks. So you've got derp guns all the way through from 7 through 9. Lots of HE coming to absolutely wreck you. The Bulldog can fight Tier 6 tanks, which don't have that many big guns. So you can have a lot more enjoyment there. It also can compete in Tier 7. But against Tier 8 tanks, that's where the Bulldog might have a little bit of trouble. But this tank has to go against Tier 9 tanks, 8 tanks, and 7 tanks with the Annihilators and Smashers, SU-1. So it's a tough tank to do well in my opinion. Looks great. If looks were an award, yeah, I'd give it a big seal of approval. But unfortunately, just go for the Bulldogs in Tier 7. What about the RU-251? Well, I mean, it's the fastest tank, you know, well, supposedly one of the fastest tanks in Blitz. Bulldog might give it a run for its money. It's hard to get up to its maximum speed, which I believe is 80. You almost never get that, except maybe if you're flying off a cliff or something like that. It's an interesting tank, and I love this crazy camo. Sometimes I hate crazy camo, and sometimes I really like it. This one I really like. This, for me, if I didn't give it to the Kunze-Panzer, which I think is a better version of this, I definitely can't give it to this one. So, give it a pass. But, is it interesting? Yes. But that's not enough to earn my must-have award. What about the T-49, the first derp light tank we've got on this list? Is this a must-have tank? Well, yes, simply because of that. The derp gun on a light tank, when this first came into the game, this was crazy good. It's not as crazy good as it once was, but it's still a very deadly tank in the right positions and against the right tanks. Definitely a tank I would say you've got to pick up. Absolutely worthy of a place in your garage. So, must have. What about the Batchat in Tier 9? Well, I think this is a good tank. It's a solid light tank. It's quite enjoyable. Doesn't make my cut. That's a tough call. I'm going to say No, not really, and I'll explain my reasoning a little later on. But sorry, tier 9, just not quite as good as another tank. So, gonna give the edge to the other one. What about the VZ? Sorry, VZ. The WZ132A. I think this is the best of the line in my opinion. It's better than the tier 10 tier for tier. I feel it's definitely better than the tier 6, 7, 8, which were pretty meh tanks. This tank is actually okay. It's decent, but do I recommend it? That's not enough to get my blood pumping. I don't ever think, oh, I've got to take this tank out because it's so much fun. So sadly, yeah, it's gonna stay in the garage pretty much most of the time. What about the Vickers CR? Well, tier for tier, I feel this is the better of the two Vickers. The tier 10 is a solid tank, but this one just really made my day when I first got it. Do I recommend it today? Does it make my cut? I don't think it does. I don't know. Just it doesn't really excite me that much. There's another tank that I think plays very similarly that will edge this out. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give this one a pass. But it is still a solid tank. The Object 84, to me, it's just too freaking slow. It feels really sluggish. The acceleration is like chugga chugga chugga. It's more like a medium tank. I don't know why it's classified as a light tank at all. But the spotting mechanism is fantastic. I've had some very good games in this tank, but to me, it's not a light tank, and therefore, I've got to disqualify it for sure. It doesn't make my cut. What about the T92E1, the second derp gun on the list? Abso-frickin-lutely, yes. Seal of approval. Ka-chung, yes. Give this tank a medal. This is a great little tank. Zippy. Gun works. And guess what? The armor actually works on this. You'll get some crazy bounces in this tank. It is shocking how often you'll get a bounce in this tank. Probably once a game, you're like, wow, another bounce? Whereas the T49, anything even sneezes in its direction and it'll take damage. So yes, this is a great tank and one worthy of a place in your garage. What about this tank, the WZ132-1? Well, I said the tier 9, tier for tier is the better tank, I think, so this one does not make my list. If the tier 9 doesn't, this definitely won't. It's unique, and I think it's, if you can play well in this tank, you can play in pretty much any tank because it's a little bit tough. It is fast, the gun does work, and it does have a very useful spotting mechanism, but that's not enough to make me want to play it regularly. So it doesn't get my must-have award. Vickers Light, well, when it first came into the game, this was a medium tank. Played as a light, and yeah, it was definitely a good tank for sure. Probably would have made my list that time, but nowadays, still a solid tank, but it's more balanced than it once was. It doesn't really excite me, so I'm going to give it a pass, unfortunately. Sad to say. What about this tank, the Russian light tank, the T100LT? This is fast. It's got that great spotting mechanism that the Object 84 has. The gun works. It's a little hard to manufacture shots, I admit that. But this is a must-have tank in my opinion. This is very, very nice. This gets around the map, can do a lot and really help out your team. It's unique in my opinion. It's what the Object 84 should be and more. So yeah, this is the tank you want. The Sheridan. Well, I gave it to the other two derp guns. Will this one make the cut? Yes, it does. I say tier for tier. I think the tier 9 is probably the best. It goes against tier 8 tanks, and I think that gives it the edge. But this tank is a very enjoyable tank as well, and this armor does work. So I've got to give it to all three of the derp guns. Yes, crazy fun is something that people should embrace, not slow, sluggish, sit and wait kind of play. This is all over the map, sniping, zooming, a little bit of everything. So that's why it's so much fun. Yes, get this tank. What about this tank? It's just come into the game, only for those players who had over 10,000 battles, so thank you very much, Wargaming. Do I recommend it? Abso-frickin-lutely, yes. Seal of approval. Why is that? Well, it's pretty much a VK2801 in Tier 7. You can look at it and say, hey, yeah, that's a pretty much copy-paste of it. But it rams pretty freaking hard for a light tank, yeah. So if you can come across such a tank like a Bulldog, you can really do a serious amount of damage just from ramming it, going downhill. Oh my goodness me. Yeah, its acceleration is good. The gun works. This is an underrated little gem, and definitely worthy of a place in your garage. But if you didn't get it, I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up. Maybe in one of those lucky drawers or something like that. I don't know, or crates. But since it was a reward for people with over 10,000 battles, maybe it'll appear again for people with 20,000 battles or something. I don't know. But right now you can't buy it, so you just have to keep your eye out and see if it pops up. Nearly always they eventually come back. Nearly always. How about the SP1C? Well, I didn't like it when it first came out. The VK2801 was the far superior tank. I would take that any day into battle against tier 8s, no problem. This tank would get wrecked against tier 8s. I've come to really enjoy this tank. I think it offers something unique. It's very, very, very small. It's got great camo values, and the gun really hits hard, actually. And this is a great tank to learn how to play the Barask, which is a much better tank, in my opinion. Does this get my seal of approval? Because of that, its uniqueness, it gets my seal of approval. Yes, I think there's a tank you do want in your garage, but be careful. If you're not sure how to play it, start off sniping in a bush somewhere, and slowly move around and get more confidence. Definitely a tank you want to pick up, in my opinion. But when it comes to the tier 7 tanks, of all tier 7 light tanks, in my opinion, there is no better tank than this tank. This is an awesome little tank. I'd heard about it for the longest time from various YouTubers. I never had it myself. I just was not interested. Every time I faced it, I absolutely wrecked it. But people were saying, yeah, it's a little bit better than the Bulldog, and it's more enjoyable. And I was like, this tank stinks. But one day I was bored. I'm like, okay, I'll pick it up. And oh my goodness me, this is great. It's not too fast. It's got great camo values. The gun, the 3 shells can cause all sorts of problems. The acceleration is nice. In my opinion, this is definitely a must-have tank in your garage. Yeah, get this little guy. Very underrated little gem. What about the AMX 1390? Well, I gave it to the tier 7 brethren. Just said it scraped in. How about this tank? When it first came into the game, this stunk. It really did. I hated it. The pen didn't work. Camo was good, but that's about it. It was fast, fair enough. But I was just getting I couldn't pen the tanks. I had to use Pramo all the time. It was really annoying. I'm like, no, this is not a tank I want. So I ignored it. However, it received a buff a while ago, and now it's a much better tank. Does it get my seal of approval? I'm not going to say so. I think just get the tier 7 if you want, the 1375. I think it's a more enjoyable tank because you can go against tier 6 tanks. This tank has to go against tier 9 tanks, and that is tough, but it's a very nice light tank. If you like light tank playstyle, I think you can enjoy this one, but it doesn't make my cuts. What about this tank, the FV301? Well, when I first got it, I didn't really like it that much. But now, in my opinion, it's probably the best Vickers-type tank in the game. I would say this is a must-have tank. It's better than nearly every Tier 8 Tech Tree medium tank. Maybe the Pantera competes against it, but I prefer this tank. It's more enjoyable. It's got a unique playstyle. It's got great camo values. Zips around with a lamp. You can have a lot of crazy fun in this tank. I would say get this tank. Yes, what a lovely tank this is. What about the Hawk 30? As you can tell from looking at it, it looks like an RU-251 or a Kunze-Panzer. Is it better than those two tanks? The answer is absolutely not. It's probably the worst of the three. Yes, I've had some interesting games in this tank, and I know Bushka said it's a pretty enjoyable tank. He likes this playstyle. It's a thinking man's tank. You're going to have to think because it doesn't have the speed. It doesn't have the HE. It doesn't have anything to write home about. To me, it's a very balanced tank, but balance doesn't get me excited. I want something unique about the tank. This doesn't have it, but is it challenging? Will it help make you a better player? That it will. But do I recommend it? Sadly, I do not. We're down to our last two tanks. The Batchat 25 Avenir, a clan event tank. Thank you very much, Wargaming. So we got it for free if you just ground a little bit. Do I recommend it? Sadly, I do not. It's okay, but the Tier 9 Tech Tree tank is the far superior tank, if you ask me. It does look nice, but that's about all it's got going for it. I would go for the Tech Tree version every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But Since the Tier 9 Tech Tree tank didn't make my list, what about the Tier 10 variant? In my opinion, heck yes. This is an awesome tank. This is what a light tank needs to be. It's fast, it's manageable, it's not crazy fast, the gun works, the camo works. It is a lovely, lovely tank. When this first came into the game, this was not an enjoyable tank in my opinion. It was very hard to play well, yeah, but it's received some love from Wargaming. Thank you very much, and well deserved and needed in my opinion. So yeah, a long time ago, the Sheridan could just absolutely wreck this tank, and yet this was not the tank you wanted to have on your team. Nowadays, they can be absolutely deadly. A double platoon of them, really strong as well. So, in my opinion, this is one of the best light tanks in the game, and therefore a must-have tank. And there you have it, my light tank selection. Hopefully you've got a list to work off now, sitting in front of you. But yeah, light tanks, in my opinion, are the last type of tanks you should learn how to play. They are hard. You need to understand maps, you need to understand bushes and camo and gun mechanics and which tanks to avoid, things like that. But they can really help influence the battle in unique ways. But if you're wanting to do damage, these are generally speaking not the tanks for you. They're more of the pests. If you want to annoy players, you want to cause trouble for the enemy team, that's where light tanks really come into their own. And especially near the end of the battle, if you've got full health or close to full health, you can really cause all sorts of havoc on the battlefield. Space is what allows these tanks to really thrive. But when there's a lot of tanks around, it's sometimes hard to get away and hide and zip away. So yeah, light tanks are a challenge in and of themselves. So just because you can win a few games in them, don't think you're a pro. These take time to master. But can you have some crazy fun? Yes, you can. And hopefully the list I've given you today will give you some food for thought, and maybe you might pick up one or two of them. Again, always go for the lower tier ones first, just to get a feel for them. Slowly work your way up to the higher tiers. The higher tiers gameplay is tougher. If you don't know what you're doing, you will get caught out easily. And so there you go. That's all I've got for you today. Now, you might not agree with my list. You might agree with my list. What I would like for you to do in the comments below is, well, share your thoughts. If there's a few tanks that you consider must-haves, whether they're ones I recommended or not, just put them in the comments below and say a few words about them. For example, let's say you like the SP1C. You say tiny, fast, hard-hitting. If you like the Panther here, you say good armor, ramming capability. Just a few words to describe the tank. Of course, you're welcome to write a thesis down below, but just a few words will suffice, I think. And that's all I got for you. I'll be back tomorrow with another type of tank for you to think about. By another group of tanks that you could consider picking up. Let's put it that way. I'll see you tomorrow. Snugs on Blitz, out.